Okay, and recording, and we're live. Hello,
Yeah.
everyone, and this is the Image Builder office hours on Wednesday, April 8th. We just want to remind everyone that this meeting is recorded and therefore should adhere to the Code of Conduct guidelines for Kubernetes and the CNCF. Light attendance and light agenda today, so thank you for attending, Prakash. And one of the first things that has been asked about is an OpenStack builder. I wanted to point out that one was merged, and so if I happen to go to the image builder, if I spell it correctly, and go check this out, there is now under Cluster API a builder under Packer for QEMU.
Oh, QM. Okay.
And
Fantastic.
I believe documentation went in for this as well because I asked for it. So if I go to sigs.case and I look at the docs, there is there's an OpenStack page. It's very light. Make build QEMU Ubuntu. But it should end up with, I think if it's OpenStack, it's probably a QCOW image.
QCOW 2. Yeah, QCOW 2.
So this should give you something that you can play with and start with for sure.
Fantastic. So just put the link there in the Etherpad and I'll just follow that.
Yeah, would you like the link to the docs for this here? Or I'd be happy to.
Both of them, if you can put in the Etherpad, what I'll do is essentially I'll try to see whether I can create it. The other thing is, can I add something to the document after trying it out? So that
that'd be great. Yeah.
I was waiting for it and I didn't. I was trying to follow on the copy, on the configuration and all that, but image is needed once the configuration is made. And so I think this is right time for me. Fantastic timing.
Okay. Yeah, I think, it hasn't been very long. I think maybe this got merged 3 weeks ago.
I see.
Yeah, so you haven't really missed it. It wasn't there for a while. Let me see when it went in. When was it merged? 15 days ago.
15 days
so
ago.
It's only been there 2 weeks.
So after I missed, it's on 1804. Fantastic. That is Ubuntu 1804 is good for me. I have it.
Okay. Okay, great.
I promise to test it out and put my head onto it, whatever I can, if there is anything I can improve.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. Thank you for being able to take a look at it. I don't think, other than the person who implemented it, I'm not sure if we've gotten any feedback on it yet. Other things on the agenda, I might be talking to myself here because they're kind of...
No, I can help you out in that. If it is related to something on load balancer and all, yeah, we can.
There's somewhat vSphere VMware specific. I have an open proposal. Let me go
maybe here. talk through it and see where I can get people, because I am working with some of the VMware folks. I can try to see.
Yeah. Sure. What this is starting with Cluster API v1 Alpha 3 and the vSphere implementation of it, which we refer to as CAP-V, Cluster API Provider vSphere. It requires a load balancer, OVA, and right now the only thing supported is HA proxy. I think that'll change in the future. As part of that, they built an OVA for that HA proxy image, but it wasn't built into the image builder. It was actually built into the CAP-V repo. And so when that was originally created, the structure to build that OVA was kind of copied from the image builder. But of course, that means that there's a lot of copying, which means that they diverged. And I am proposing that I want to take over building of that OVA because it's required to deploy a cluster with CAP-V, and the image builder has the intent of building images required for cluster API deployments. And this came up because within the last couple of weeks, there were lots of errors or issues that came up because the tooling for building images was different between the two. And so I had to make commits into 2 different repos. And so I filed this issue with the CapV repo directly, and all the feedback that I've gotten, which is only 2 people, and has been, yes, please take it over. But I at least wanted to bring it up here so someone could comment on it as if there was a good reason not to do it.
So I think I have a guy who might be interested. I'll bring him in because I was discussing with him. Since I work in the Airship community, there is a Airship UI, and they use a product of the open source from VMware called Octant.
I'm familiar with that one.
Yes, so the Octant needs to connect with copy. So I was telling him, are you going to connect to bare metal directly, or are you going to go through copy? If you go through copy, then that will be better. And since you have brought the image here, I think this is the right point. There is some convergence between the two.
And yeah, convergence here is good. Octant mostly just talks to the Kubernetes API server. It can get everything it needs about CAPI, CAPV, and everything as CRDs from the API server. So that's its main, if not the only one, but maybe not the only one. That's the main thing it talks to.
Yeah, there will be many, but at least one of them is through copy. And since we are talking of copy, CAPI image here, which is, so it's based on ESXi first. Is it a VM or is it a container, the image here?
The HA proxy, it ends up being a VM.
A VM. So VM with a HA proxy, and that VM is the OVA 1.1, 1.2. I don't know what is that because OVA has one is the metadata part, another is the runtime part, right? 2 separations are there.
In the OVAs are basically just a tar file, and then within the tar file, there is an OVF, which is all the metadata, which is in XML, and it defines defaults for the virtual machine specs, number of CPUs, RAM, disk, network. All of that can be changed when you import it or launch it, and then it contains the disk, the VM.
Sorry.
If you're doing it really well, it also includes a .mf, a manifest file that contains SHA sums for both of those files to make sure everything's not corrupted. And that's it. It's only 3 files is what we package up in there. There's a couple options for other files, but we're not using them right now. But yeah, this is really about convergence and building it with the same tooling. And the original thought was, oh, this is very specific to vSphere, so it doesn't belong in the image builder. But since it's required with V1 Alpha 3, and the image builder is supposed to build images specific for cloud providers, like, I think that's where it belongs. You know, everything in the Azure stuff is specific to Azure. Everything for Amazon is specific to Amazon. So I don't think that matters anymore. And the only feedback I've gotten is yes. So I at least wanted to bring it up. And yeah, this is something.
So to me, it looks like the image builder is going to be creating a tar.gz file.
No, for which provider?
So for the CAPV, which we are now discussing here, and that with HA proxy. Instead of HA proxy, you could be using any load balancer, right? So is the base image, does it include HA proxy?
So there are 2 images that end up being used when you're deploying a cluster with CAPV for vSphere. One is the node image used to create your master nodes, your control nodes and your worker nodes. The other image is the load balancer node. And right now, yes, theoretically it could be any load balancer, but when you're using CAPV, the only supported one right now is HA proxy. That will change, but that's the state of it right now.
So you need to create one for the master node and one for the worker node also, right?
No, right now it's the same image.
Oh, okay.
They get configured differently through Cloud Init and KubeADM, but right now there's one OVA that is what we call the node image, and that's the same concept if you're deploying on AWS. There's one AMI that gets created that is the node image. It's just with vSphere, there's this second OVA that gets created for the load balancer. And so, yeah, we're not creating a tarball, not a TGZ file. It is an OVA that gets imported into vCenter.
The other aspect of it is, how do you know that how the scale out will be there, and what kind of flavors we'll be using for those images? Any like, if I remember correctly, when I used to compile for the images, we had to say, okay, this much is the memory, 8 gig, 16 gig, how much you want to give. So is
Yeah,
there any?
these are more questions specific to Cluster API, but the way that works, let me see if I know how to show examples of that. Let's see. Let's go to cluster. The docs will probably show it, but and it is specific to the provider, vSphere versus AWS. But as part of when you create a cluster and you deploy something like a machine set, you define that in there, I believe. And
so is it part of the cluster cuttle command for minus something F minus something? You provide the configuration.
Yes,
The YAML
yes, and it ends up being something that is in the YAML that you provide to Cluster Cuttle.
Okay, got it.
And so, for example, on AWS, somewhere in that YAML, in the AWS infrastructure block, you're going to define not only an AMI ID, but an instance type. T2, although it wouldn't be T2, you're not going to use a tiny. And the same thing on vSphere. vSphere supports a couple different modes. So you upload the OVA, and then you have to convert it to a template in vSphere. And then from there, you've got a couple of options. If you want the fastest possible way to bring up your cluster, what you would end up having to do is, before you created a template, you have to take a snapshot of the disk and then convert it to a template. And then in your YAML, you can specify a link, that the cloning mode is a linked clone, and then it'll do a fast clone. The gotcha with that is that you can't change the disk size if it's a linked clone. So whatever the disk size is when you create your template and all of that is what the size will be. The other way around that is, instead of doing a clone mode of a linked clone, you can do a clone mode of a full clone where it copies the disk. If you do that, you can specify a bigger disk size than what the template is. And when the machine comes up as part of Cloud Init, it'll grow the file system to whatever size the disk is.
Yeah, I did see one of the OpenStack example configuration I have just put in the chat window. That's what I saw, the how they do it for creating that YAML file for the configuration, and it has got many options.
Yeah.
It has got many options. If you go at the top, it tells you how to create the cluster cuttle file with the flavors. So when you create the first time itself, the cluster configuration, that includes the provider, that includes the version of the Kubernetes, that includes the either you can use config map, or you can. So this is generic. This is not generally not specific to OpenStack, but can be used by any provider.
Yeah,
so
and
that takes care of it.
Yeah, and I believe the flavors here is more talking about, it says high availability. It'd be like a dev versus a production thing. So 3 master nodes, 3 worker nodes versus 1 master node and 2 worker nodes, something like that. I believe. I'd have to look. Like I said, these are.
But the alternate way is there through config map also they can do. So that is probably maybe worth looking at. I don't know whether that is. It is the source, right? So where is our CapV template and how we pull it out, from where we pull it out. Yeah, but this is worth looking at. Thanks for the information. I think I got now. So the question is, do you think HA proxy is sufficient for the load balancing? Because we are going to use VIO, right?
Yeah.
No.
That I'm not sure of. I mean, do I think it's sufficient? I think it depends on use cases and requirements, and that's not right now my expertise. If if you have concerns about that, I think the
No,
right.
no, no, no. I'm just, I'm not, at this time, I'm not enough knowledgeable to raise a concern. I'm seeing the possibilities that are there, like because in VMware, they use NSXT as the baseline for telco networking.
Yes.
And then the question is, okay, that is for the transport, I can understand. But when it comes to, again, uh, the instead of flannel, if I want to use Calico, or for the networking related to uh, container, how does it uh, get supported in this? Because load balancing, after all, you have to go across the
The
nodes, right?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things I would say is like I don't want to make this meeting vSphere
Mm-hmm.
specific, but since it's just you and I, we can chat about it. Most of your questions are more relevant to CAP-V, Cluster API Provider
Okay.
vSphere. The images that we build that get used by CAP-V don't have like an overlay or a CNI plugin installed.
Okay.
That
Okay.
is deployed as an add-on by
Okay.
CAP-V. The default happens to be Calico right now because not everyone has NSXT or has got a license for it or something. So the default out of the box is Calico, just like
Which
HA
is,
Proxy is. Whether enterprise products would do the same is a shrug for me. In that, I think that gets into more like a supported product rather than a community question here.
correct. Correct. I think Calico is good enough. That's what I would go with. So
Yeah.
basically, that means it meets the requirement mostly. And also HA proxy, then when you talk about at what protocol are we going to give balancing, load balancing, layer 3, transport, layer 4, or in terms of what are the protocols supported in HA proxy by default? That would be the question then next.
Okay, yeah, and that again is all dependent on how CAP-V configures and deploys that, and that is orthogonal to building the image for me.
Correct. Correct. So the issue will be the CAP-V has to specify what are the environment variables and what are the various variables that we need to include as part of the generation. So will that
Yeah.
not be a requirement for building the image from CAP-V? Asking CAP-V, what should we do for configuration, or is it?
No,
This is
because
the
the way
default.
that it ends up getting configured is through Cloud-init. So
Oh,
CAP-V will configure the node the way that it wants to configure the node by passing in Cloud-init user data.
User data. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So they will provide the user data. Got it.
The thing we need, or the thing that we create, and even in, I mean, let me jump over here. This is within CAP-V. I can kind of show you if you like, but what gets created is an OVA that just has HA proxy in it without really any configuration, and it's up to CAP-V to create it. So it's using something called Data Plane API, and so in here I might have misspoke. It says it's remotely configurable. It may not be done through Cloud-init, but that's part of this Data Plane API. So I probably misspoke there.
That's okay.
So it is being configured by CAP-V somehow, and I personally don't care how. I just know that it does and that it works.
No, that has to be data plane or user plane because the traffic is being load balanced here. So obviously they will do it probably through data plane API, which is remote basically. That's what they're
saying. And I have a feeling it's the CAP-V controller doing it, but I honestly don't know. But right now they have taken on. If you've looked through the image builder code base at all, this will look a little bit familiar. And then there's these Ansible scripts, roles, and it's done with Packer, and it uses the VMware ISO builder. And so these steps right here is what I'm proposing, and I'm going to bring over to image builder. It'll be something that ends up being optional. What I mean by that is when you type make and you want to build the OVAs, pass an extra flag or a different or a different make target potentially to build this OVA, because this one doesn't change very much.
Yeah, I think so. They have built in that the disk size, the memory, and all that is default.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it now. Thank you.
Okay.
They
Yeah, you're
have
welcome. And so, yeah, it sounds like you're really interested in learning more about this stuff. Most of the questions you're asking are more relevant either to Cluster API or the specific provider.
Yeah.
Category.
So the reason is why I am focusing from Cluster API point of view, what the providers need. And specifically, I'm focused on two of them. One is OpenStack, the other is VMware, both.
Okay.
Since I work in open source, my focus right now has been on the OpenStack. That's why I asked that question. And this also being relevant because I'm definitely connected with this also. So I think I will see if I can, if you need any help from me, I can ask Chandra, who is working for VMware, to be part of this. I'll request him if he can join on a regular basis.
Okay.
And if he can
Yeah.
contribute, that will be great. Because, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, with this specific work here, it's not something that I will need help with.
Sure.
It's just one of those things where want to get community feedback first before making such change.
So,
and then, okay.
Yeah, so I think implementing OVF metadata in Go versus Python, that's a question, $1 million question.
Yeah, this is, again, yeah, it was just something I wanted to put out there to see if anybody had feedback. But one of the things that happens, I can show you, one of the things that happens in, go to the right one here, I'll have to dig in. The way that we're building the actual OVAs right now is a little interesting. It works fine. But when we actually go to build an OVA, it's a Python script. And the way that this ends up working is we read in a bunch of information from the Packer build itself, from the manifest file. There's a couple things that we can override, like where the disk is. But in general, it's pretty much as simple as we take an XML template, fill in a bunch of the fields that need to be filled in, and then tar up a put that in an OVF and then create the tar file that has the OVF, the VMDK, and the manifest file, and that's it. One of the things that is becoming more important to me, both in an upstream sense and a downstream sense, is being able to customize more fields in here or add fields that are optional, where there might not be something if I'm building upstream for the community, but there might be things I want to inject downstream for VMware products. And this methodology for doing it becomes problematic because everything that I want to put in, since it's just like a simple Python template here, like I can't put logic in here. And what I would rather do is be able to write a tool in Go that also has a base template, but you can feed it a YAML file that says, here's what I want you to set things in. And then we can build up that template. And if the YAML says, hey, and I also want you to fill this field, like within the product section, there's these properties. But say I want to add a property in this product envelope that isn't there already. There's no way to do that today. I have some Python that will do it, actually, and I started to go down that road. But it's just not as flexible because what I end up having to do is add a flag to the Python script and say, add this. Like for everything I want to add, I need to add like a flag. I'd rather just read in a YAML file, and I could do it in Python as well, but I'd rather read in a YAML file and say, here's everything I want you to set. And if it's not there, it sets it to some default, or it's not present, or something like that. The other reason that this is interesting to me is that while it's a little bit nascent, we are working on proposing and implementing, and when I say we, I mean the group working on Image Builder here, including Moshe and people working with him, creating a CLI in front of the Image Builder, so you don't have to use make, and giving it flags. And that's going to be written in Go. That's pretty much what we standardize in Kubernetes community. And so if I do that in Go, it gives me the ability to import that or use it from that CLI eventually, and potentially others. So it becomes a more useful tool rather than a Python script right now.
So the Go versus Python, Go is obviously multi-threaded and much more used in the parallel computing. Now, for the image building in itself, does it require like you need to build hundreds and thousands? No.
No, this is not a performance or
Yeah, it's not a
parallelism
performance
issue. No.
Yeah, so it is not a performance issue. So yeah, maybe immutability. The most of the Pythons will do substitution only, right? Of a given field. Here we are talking of adding a new parameter in itself, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I just substitute a property with a value, so it's a key value pair. So replacement of value is fine. But if you have to add a key, which is like changing the whole structure, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. You use a tool like a Python library like LXML, and you construct an XML document in Python, and you can add and remove fields and properties, tags. All these different things are easily manipulatable. Manipulated. I can't speak today. You can change them with Python very easily. Like this doesn't have to be done as a string template where we're replacing variables. You would treat it as an actual XML document and then export that document and write it out at the end. It is doable. And I have code that does that is unpublished right now, but it's working. It was just more the flexibility that I have to add and remove things is a little bit better if I can take it from something like a YAML file and read that.
Correct. So the movement from XML to YAML and the ability of YAML to be manipulated through Go, that goes in well. I think that's a good one. But justification on performance for Go will not be the one.
No, and in some ways it's an extra step because you have to compile it. You can't just run the script.
Correct.
So it changes one dependency for another, and there are certainly trade-offs. And so I don't know that I have a agreement or that I have all interested parties around today to make a decision on it. It's something I'd like to discuss with Moshe, but I kind of know where he falls on this because when I told him I was going to add a bunch of Python to do that, or really when I told him what I was trying to accomplish, he asked, "Are you writing in Go?" And I said, "No, Python." He's like, "Oh, okay." So I know he wants to see it in Go.
So in that case, certainly, okay, let's do one thing. When is the next meeting? Same next Wednesday, right?
This meeting occurs every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, okay. So 8 plus 7, 15 plus 7, 22. So when the next meeting occurs, I will try to see if I can get somebody to join who is motivated to do it in Go. Because if you have something in Go, a lot of people want to do it just for the language sake. That is one. The second is, obviously, it does serve the purpose for us. So it's win-win for both contributors' motivation versus the requirement from the image builder officer. So I think we'll try, see what we can do. But certainly I like it.
Yeah, and this is all work I'm intending to take on. I just don't want to start or go too far down the path if it wouldn't be well received by the project. So bringing it up early before I waste any time.
No, so the same question people will ask, and I think if it is not a performance issue, it is more of a falling line with the Kubernetes to use Go. Second is it has got some advantage, like you can easily do template modifications and all that with the ease of using. And that those two itself. So there are some pros and cons we can say, are not cons, but more than that, generally when we think of Go, we think of performance. That's not the case here. It's more to do with the structure and how to edit or insert the structures with newer values, newer key value pairs, types of things. So yes, I think time permitting, if you have, I would give a, maybe it will not be on the high priority list, but priority 2, yes. Just if people are there, it should be done. So I'll give a +1 to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to go over? Any other
No,
questions?
I think it was really chance meeting you, Travis, and appreciate, and it really opened out my eyes also on the OpenV side of it, which I was not CapV side of it, which I was not really pursuing, but people were asking me and I didn't have answer. Now I have the answer.
Okay, yeah, and I think, let me see if it's on their README. I mean, there's an office hours for CapV, just like there is for this. Of course, I don't think, oh, here we go. So bi-weekly on Mondays at 1 Pacific.
Okay.
So that one, especially if you got questions about HA proxy, how that's configured, templates, how to configure templates, this would be the meeting to go to. But it might all be covered, you always hope, but as you're saying, like as you go through things and you find gaps in the docs, there might be things that you can, feedback you can give or improvements, but there is a pretty good getting started guide here. I think the providers have moved to like the official docs are all under Cluster API now. So like there's individual provider sections in the Cluster API docs, but there's still this getting started guide, which is pretty useful about how to do things with Cluster CUDL and that kind of stuff.
Okay, I think this helps. I'll pass on the information what I have acquired from you to the people who want to participate, and look forward to seeing you again in next 15 days, next 14 days.
Okay, great.
Take care and stay safe. Yep.
All right, same to you. Thank you.